Hello and welcome back to another video on my road to 2400. I am going to show the two games that were the final two of the tournament I played at the weekend. Covered in the previous videos, I'd got 2 wins and a draw, so I probably need to win the last 2 games to come first place. Let's see if I did it. The fourth round and the first game that I'll show today was against a mid-2100 player who I have played before and did lose by blundering. I was white. I was hoping I could get revenge. So I play e4 and e5 is chosen. Knight c3, Vienna, knight f6, f4. So I play this gambit to try and confuse my opponent. If they don't know the lines, I can win very fast. And if they do know the lines, then I usually get about an equal position. d5. And then here I'm not sure about my move. It has been played before, but I'm not sure I'll do it again. I played d3. The main line is taking the pawn on d5 usually. But this move does potentially confuse my opponent, as was my aim. So e takes f4. If I do bishop takes f4, then black can capture on e4 and give me an isolated king's pawn, which is quite rare and not usually very good. And I just didn't really want to have that, so I played e5 to kick away their knight. Then I'm going to take their pawn. Knight g4, bishop takes f4. And now black did something unexpected. I was thinking that they may play knight c6 to attack e5 twice. Then I will play d4 and hold the pawn on e5, have a good space advantage in the center, and it will also help me deploy my f1 bishop. Instead, black played a clever move, d4, forcing my knight to move, which I did. I went forwards. I don't like moving back. Knight e4, centralizing. After knight c6, attacking my pawn, I defend it. But then queen d5 happens. And what would you play as white? You can't defend the pawn. There's no move I can see that's very good in terms of trying to hold the pawn together. So I played the sort of simple move, bishop e2. My plan is to castle kingside, have the f file for my rook, and potentially play rook a1 to e1 in the future. I have rooks on the e and f file. Takes. And I could not take here and just castle, but I chose to capture, even though it sort of is helping relieve tension, which black doesn't want a complicated position when they're a pawn up. What it does is that because black has a space advantage, it reduces the sort of cramped nature of my position by trading one minor piece off. It allows things like bishop f3 in the future. So castles. I think black maybe made a small mistake. If I was playing as black, I would play bishop e7 with the very simple plan of castling kingside straight away. This would remove lots of my tactical opportunities, and I think, quite a bit worse. Maybe I can get something in the future, but I don't think I would elect to be white if I had the choice of playing as white or black. Bishop e6 was chosen. So black is trying to castle queenside. The noise you hear is an ambulance going past, if you can hear it. Bishop e6 tries to castle queenside. This will give black a very, very safe king. My pieces don't really have a good way to go to the queen side, so I prevent that with bishop g5. Can't castle through check. I'm holding the d8 square hostage. And if black plays f6 to steal from Ben Feingold on some of his videos, never play pawn f6 when you're black. I have a rule that adds to that, which is always play pawn f6 when you're white, because it generally helps you attack. But anyway, black shouldn't play f6. I can take f6. Pawn takes back. Knight takes with a fork on the king and queen. I will win the queen and recoup all my lost material with interest. So f6 is not really playable. h6 was played, and in the same vein, bishop f6. What this does is it ties down their bishop on f8. It can't move because g7 will be taken. Again, my bishop is immune from capture because of knight recaptures, again forking king and queen. And also their queen is now tied down a little to their knight as I'm attacking it. And I was hoping that black would blunder in fun ways with knight d7, bishop f3, and again this knight f6 plan. If my bishop is taken, then whatever takes it I'll take back with the knight. Check. If my knight's taken, I take the queen with my f3 bishop. And I've improved my pieces really well. Black is paralysed practically. My next plan might be queen e1 or queen e2, lining up with their king, adding even more power to my assault on their king. So rook g8 was played. Very strange move. I think the plan is at some point in the future to take my bishop, or to threaten to take my bishop, and have the g file open to my king. Queen e1 is what I play. I need to improve my heavy pieces. Bishop f3, I didn't like it as much because they can trade. Queen e1 does have the idea of queen g3 or queen h4 with a venomous attack. King d7. This move is kind of giving up castling, but the plan is to go rook e8, king c8, and you castle by hand. Queen g3, I'm just in time to still cause problems. The knight's attacked twice. I still have a idea of knight f6 if my bishop is taken, and if they take my bishop they'll also lose the rook. Knight c6 was played, escaping with their knight, going backwards, giving me more space. So I make use of the fact that knight c6 has been played. What move do I play that wasn't as good when the knight was on e5? I play bishop f3. Now, there's a nice knight move, which could happen if their queen stays where it is. I've got moves like knight g5. I've got even knight c3 if I want to be cute. And I could even move the bishop on f6 somewhere, then play knight f6 check. Black plays bishop d6, going for my queen. And I could easily take their bishop with my knight, then they recapture with their queen to save it. And I suspect that I've probably got maybe an equal position, maybe black's a touch better, but I've for the most part equalised. I didn't want to do that yet though, because black is still very badly placed. So queen h4. Again, the bishop is immune. King c8 is chosen, so black is hurriedly trying to castle with advantage. And now I realised that my position was starting to become slightly untenable in the next few moves. What was going to happen, I suspect, was black might move their queen, upon which my bishop on f6 would be attacked for real, and it would be hard for me to find a safety square. So I felt like now was the right time to recoup the pawn. Can anyone see what would happen after queen takes d6? What do I play as white? Yeah, I give back the bishop pair. Get opposite coloured bishops if they capture on c6. So I've probably at least got a draw, because their king is still weaker than my king. If they take on f6 though, I was thinking that I would then retreat with my bishop to e4, centralisation of the bishop. And here f6 and h6 are both attacked. I don't think there's a way to defend both of those pawns. One of them will drop. Queen c6 was chosen, upon which I can take d4 with the bishop. Again, I've equalised, at least. b6, black's trying to give a bolt hole for their kings, their rooks are connected. Here I thought the only imbalance is the bishops, which are on opposite squares, but they're still a bishop each. Queen and two rooks each, obviously a king, and we both have 6 pawns. What's the other imbalance besides the fact that we have opposite coloured bishops? It's the pawns. White has 4 on the queen side, 2 on the king side. Black has 3 on each side. So there are 2 majorities, competing majorities on either side. And if you think of it in terms of ratios, black's doing better. My majority is 4-3. Their majority is 3-2. And 3-2 is a greater margin than 4-3. So for me to have any chance of winning this game, I think I need to start pushing my majority. Push my pawns up, make use of the extra pawn, try and create a passed pawn, push it and hopefully win. c4. King b7. Black still needs to spend a move playing statically to sort of organise themselves. I played bishop c3, so I'm thinking of pushing the d pawn. Black now is fully developed, and so am I with rook d1. King b8. I'm not sure that move is necessary, but it does get out of any annoying checks when I have queen e4. And my next move is b3, so the plan is to play d4, d5. I couldn't play d4 last turn because the c4 pawn would get taken. f5 is chosen, and then I didn't play d4. Can anyone see why d4 is not the best move? There's a cute little tactic. After d4, they have b5. So let's eliminate possibilities. If I take on b5, I lose my c3 bishop. That's not playable. If I push c5, which does at first look quite nice, what they can do is they can use the fact this pawn is backwards. It can't ever come forwards without weakening c5. So they can just plonk their bishop in front. Then all of a sudden my bishop is really bad, where it's having to maneuver around to say e5 way in the future. And black can just hold their bishop in the centre with bishop d5, get the open e-file, I suspect, quite soon, and maybe play things like queen g6, going for mate on g2. And also, my pawns can't be pushed anymore, so black can now start shoving their 3 against 2 on the king side. I think I would be significantly worse here. The final move, d5, does at first look nice. I'm doing a fork. Black simply has capturing on d5. The moment my pawn on c4 captures a piece on d5, I'll lose the c3 bishop. So if I play rook takes d5, they'll recapture with their rook. Then when I take their rook with the pawn, they take my bishop. So overall, black wins the pawn. So I play a4, stopping b5. Also, it helps me push more pawns, so I thought it was useful. Bishop c8, so the bishop is rerouting to b7 to threaten mate on g2. I'm just in time to stop it though with d4. If black plays bishop b7, I will play d5, which then will be very effective. g5, black's pushing their majority. Another reason behind playing the move bishop c8 is the queen is now guarding h6, so I can't take it. I run away. Black continues to push, and so do I. It's pretty close now. I still think black might be a touch better, but I was hoping that my pawns might be able to cause problems. Queen g6, rook fe1. So I don't just mindlessly push pawns. I do try to activate all my pieces as well. Black does the same. They don't think that pushing g4, g3 will work yet, so they think let's get the open file. Bishop e5. I don't want to trade loads of pieces. I had to win this game to stay in the running for the tournament, so I have to try avoiding the trade of pieces. Also, if you notice, I had 24 minutes. My opponent had less than 1 minute left, so there's also a factor of trying to run them out of time. Queen f5. How do I avoid trading pieces? I defend the bishop. I don't move it, otherwise we again have a trade. Queen d4, f3. This move's very annoying. If I play a move like g3 or g4 to avoid a trade of pawns, black has the great move f2 with a deflection tactic. If I don't take the pawn with my queen, I will lose my rook. So queen takes f2 is practically forced, and then black has rook takes bishop, defending everything. And I've lost a piece. I could probably resign despite the fact my opponent had about a minute left, because we were using increments of 15 seconds a move. Unfortunately, I have to take. Queen captures back. I play rook d3 to sort of evict their queen, and I'm perfectly prepared to take the queen trade now, because if I did nothing, there was bishop h3 and all sorts of nasty tactics. Because my king was less safe, I don't mind the trade of queens. I've still got the 2 rooks. That might be worth something. Again, I could play b4, and that's probably the best move, but instead I double up rooks with a threat. What's my threat? It is bishop captures on c7 with a discovered attack on their rook. So I'll lose the bishop but win a rook out of the exchange if they don't do anything useful. Black played king b7 so that if I take the pawn they don't have to take me back, and they can first trade rooks, then take my bishop. So I will be losing a piece. Now I keep pushing b4, I have to keep my majority active, otherwise it's most likely a draw. I'm not sure about rook d7, but it does make sense to try and double up on the e-file, trying to ensure a trade of pieces. I think I made the wrong move here, but I was hoping to maybe add a last piece to the attack, create enough pressure to force my opponent into a bad position where he'll blunder. I thought I could bring up the king with king g2. Maybe king f2 is better because it avoids placing the king on a square that can be checked by the black bishop. Black continued improving. I now was allowed to push c5 because their rooks come off the d-file, so d5 is not on prise anymore. King moves. Black doesn't really want to open the position by trading pawns. I try to force the issue, keep a trade of pawns going, and the more pawns are traded, the greater my ratio of pawns becomes, and the greater my advantage is. Rook d7, I'm really not sure about this move, because I think I'm winning now, after a takes b6. If black takes on d5, I can play all sorts of moves, like bishop takes c7 is quite good, pawn takes a7 must be good as well, and even but bishop or pawn takes on c7 is very strong, I think. But yeah, pawn takes a7 might be what I played. If black takes with the c-pawn, they're in all sorts of trouble because I now have 2 connected passed pawns. I can probably do something like pawn d6, and then I'm going to play pawn c6 with a crushing attack, and things are not looking so good. I could also play bishop d6 with the idea of owning the e-file and then coming up with a very strong attack. I hadn't fully decided. I had 22 minutes, so I could have analysed it all I wanted. The line I did see, though, was if a takes, which is natural, not giving me any passes, I can switch. I've now got another open file. Rook a1. Rook a8 is coming with a skewer. Black defends their rook. And what's quite nice is that if I go rook b7, rook a8 check, king b7 just about saves their position. So I cut that move out and sacrifice my bishop, kind of. I'm keeping their king in the kill zone. They can't move off the 8th rank, so rook a8 is going to be checkmate. If they move their king to d8, it's still looking horrible. After king d8, I'm sure there must be a checkmate somewhere here, but I was going to play simple with this check. Bishop c8 only move, and then the very simple bishop f6. And funnily enough, black's in a kind of Zugzwang position. They can't actually do anything with any of their pieces. If their bishop moves, it's illegal because it's pinned. The king is not allowed to move. The e7 rook is not allowed to move, and the e8 rook is not allowed to move. Otherwise, I'll win their rook for nothing. So black could easily resign in this position, but if they try playing a cute move like g4, I could run them out of pawn moves by just shuffling my king up and down. But I think I might do rook a3, and black is able to resign now. If they play a move like rook f8, what is white's most accurate move? What's the best move? hope you found it. It's checkmate in 2 goes. Rook takes bishop check. There's no other move besides capturing. And then the king is back in the kill zone, back in the mating net. I can go rook a8, checkmate. So in the game, black played on a sort of funny move, bishop f3. Apparently computers say I should play some bizarre move like king g1 or something to prevent any future checks, so I can mate faster, but I'm not a computer, I'm human, so I may as well capture a free bishop. Rook f7, king e2. No more good checks, if you even thought of those as good checks. And I'm still threatening this mating attack, and it's all gone. If black tries to run away with king to d8, I wonder if you can guess what I would play here. I think it's the most accurate move, but even if it isn't, I would do it anyway. I feel like it's almost poetic. I can give back the bishop with f6 check. Black has to put something on e7 or capture on f6. Doesn't matter which one they do. Probably taking the bishop is the most obvious move. And then I can play rook to a8, checkmate. Again, the king cannot escape the mating net. So that was the first game. He actually resigned after playing... I think it was after I played king e2 he resigned. But he would have not played on for much longer if he'd have been determined to keep going. So I was now on 3.5 out of 4. I was playing very well. There was one person who was on 4 out of 4. And rather annoyingly, a player lower rated than me was floated up to play him, who was on the same points as me. So I couldn't come first outright now. I was floated down. I was playing someone on 3.5, who is an FM, very strong player. So I had to win to potentially come first equal. If the player on 4 points out of 4 had won, I had no chance. But I felt like if there was a draw or a win from the lower rated player, and I won, I'd come joint first. So I was still fighting for it. I was black this game. He played e4. I decided to play an offbeat opening as usual. Not something terribly strange, but something a little bit different than the norm. And I play knight bd7. I think I've seen a few games of his where he's played moves like bishop e3, queen d2, with the idea that when I castle, and by playing g6, bishop g7, bishop h6 can be played much later. I'll lose my dragon bishop on g7 and things could get concerning. So I decide to wait and see what he does. f4 cuts out bishop h6 as a plan, but what it does plan is to go e5, which I don't like being this cramped this early on. So I strike back. I believe it might be Aronian, but I might be wrong, it might be somebody else who's played this line a few times. So white does trade everything, and then trades the queens. I take. So how do you evaluate this position? Do you think is white to move? Do you think white's better? Do you think it's equal? Do you think black's better? What's your point of view? So overall, white is, I think computers give white as having a small advantage, but I think long term black is better because of the weak isolated king spawn, which again almost never happens. That's a minus. Also the fact that despite my king having moved and not having the ability to castle, in openings like the Berlin Wall, black has proved that despite their king appearing poorly placed, they can easily find a good refuge for it when the queens are off. So I'm not sure my king position is that bad, and my knights are more active than white's pieces. So as long as I don't positionally get a disadvantage, I should be fine. Bishop g5 is played, so I don't mind if they trade the bishop for the knight here, doubling my pawns. It's about quick development, I think. So c6 cuts out them playing knight d5, and it also gives a bolt hole for my king after the move castles with check, which incidentally is one of my favourite moves to play in a game. I can go king c7, and I have got my king to safety. Knight f3 is chosen. So I don't really want to trade yet. I might trade next move, but I think bishop d6, just to make sure that everything is fully defended, is good. And if bishop f4 with a kind of pin, which can be quite nasty, what would you play as black in this position? He doesn't win any material, but I am interested in the move knight to d3 check. You can also do knight f d7 with a defense of the knight, and then play things like f6 just to guard everything. But this is quite a passive approach. I do quite like the idea of winning the bishop pair with a check. I think if white doesn't want to have an isolated pawn the whole game, they're going to have to take with the pawn, upon which I take the bishop. And here their activity is greatly reduced because their rook and f1 bishop are both sort of shut in by the d3 pawn. And I can then play things like bishop to g4 or bishop e6, put my rooks in the centre, and my sort of lack of coordination or my slight weaknesses have now become very strong. And white hasn't really done well here. So I'm generally safe. Bishop e2 was chosen, and here I do actually want to trade some pieces, because if I play a move like bishop e6, there's all sorts of nasty ideas of like rook takes d6 with an exchange sack, and then rook d1 check, and I have to move away, and then they take my knight. So my coordination is not yet perfect. My bishop and knight on d6 and e5 are a little bit too kind of cramped and too dependent on one another. So I trade the piece. They take back to not have an isolated pawn. And there's an idea seen in the Nimzo Indian, which is normally when pawns are on d4 and c3, so like a mirror version, you want to control the square in front of the backward pawn, so they can't advance it and have two pawns side by side, which are generally the strongest kind of a formation of pawns. So I play knight h5 with the idea of knight f4 or bishop f4. Bishop c4 is chosen, attacking my pawn. Apparently, I can't remember what the computer said after the game, but I think it was something strange like rook f8 from memory, but I played, I think, a much simpler move, pawn f6. Breaking my rule, never play f6, but in these types of positions, rules like that aren't too important because there's no dynamic features really here. It's all a static position. Bishop e3, bishop h3. So this move's a bit counterintuitive. I'm putting my bishop all the way on h3 where it doesn't appear to be doing a lot. Normally you want to be in the centre. What I'm doing though is threatening bishop g2 with a fork on f3 and h1. Also connecting my rooks, which is very critically important. So rook d2 is chosen. White's planning to both defend h2 and stop bishop g2, so that way their rook on h1 can now move around freely. Rook a d8, I want to improve my rook, and I'm going for a small trap. I don't think he'll fall for it. What would you do if bishop takes a7 were played? There are two very strong moves. I'm not sure about b6 being the strongest. I think it's probably the second best move, because it shuts in their bishop in a coffin, as they call it, and you can then chase it down later. But they have moves like knight to a4, and then things get complicated in this particular line. What's a lot stronger than that, I think, is bishop to f4 with a pin on their rook and also an attacking piece as well with my rook on d8. Black is now dominating the position and has a pretty comfortable advantage. So rook g1 was chosen to attack g7, keep my knight tied down so it can't go to f4. Rook d7, so just like white did, I'm pushing my rook up one square, defending laterally, trying to put the h rook on d8. Knight e2, this stops bishop f4. Bishop h2 is an interesting move because it does at first appear to be good, but then rook h1, and I've got loads of pieces on the h-file. So I don't really want an open h-file for their rook. I play rook h d8, just improving, playing simple chess. Knight g3 is now chosen by white, so coming forwards, stopping my attacks on the king side, potentially trading pieces. And I could have blundered really badly here with the move knight f4, which is another favourite move of mine. Here, though, it isn't so strong. What does white do now to get the advantage? White can play, yet again, the bishop and knight are too dependent on one another. Rook takes bishop. And then when I take with the king, or the rook. Bishop takes knight. They get 2 pieces at least for the rook. I don't like 2 bishops against my rook. It just looks too good. So instead, bishop f4. If knight takes knight, I take their bishop with a fork and a pin and everything. So they trade. I take back. Rook takes. I take back. Knight e2, offering the trade of pieces, and I was determined to win this because I need to come first. So I try avoiding the trade with knight to g2 coming to e3 potentially, or h4 with attacks on their weak pawns. But genius move, bishop e6. I did not see this at all. Very, very nice move from white. It is giving me a bishop against knight scenario in the ending, but the position is just about closed enough for white to be level here. I can't really do anything to stop it either. There's no weird tricks with like knight f4 or anything, because they just take the knight and they're guarding all their pieces. So I have to begrudgingly trade. And I just went g6, stopping any attacks on g7, so my rook is now free to move around again. h4, white's potentially trying to trade off their h-pawns by playing h5, takes g6, takes g6. And even if I don't lose the g6 pawn, white won't have an isolated h-pawn anymore. So it's a way to minimize their pawn weaknesses. And I now need to activate my pieces. So active kings in the ending win games. Push my king forward. They stop me going to e5, which was my plan. So king c5. I'm now improving my rook and my king, so causing white some trouble. Knight g3. So white's trying to play maybe f5 or h5 to again try and trade off pawns, go into a drawn position. Rook d4. I'm tying down the knight here, trying to cause lots of problems. Why is bishop takes a2 not a good move? Again, the coffin, b3. Bobby Fischer fell for this against Spassky in, I believe, the first game of their World Championship match in '72. He was in a drawn bishop and pawn ending, and he took a pawn on, I think it was h2 actually, and then Spassky was able to play g3 and trap the bishop in exactly the same way as this position, with king b2 and then king takes bishop. So rook d4. a3, so just cutting out any chance of me taking on a2, even if their king was a mile away. There was no chance. So I don't want them to play b4 and kick my king around a bit. I want to restrict their play with a5, push my pawns up. h5 was played, and I thought I was winning with bishop g4. This not only threatens the pawn, but threatens checkmate in one. But then they had this amazing move, knight to e2, and I just couldn't see a win. If bishop takes knight, rook takes bishop, pawn takes pawn, so it looks like I've won a pawn despite my double pawns. This would be generally okay. But then e5 is played. I can't now go king d6 because it's covered. So there isn't a way for my king to kind of blockade the pawn. I can't take on f4 because then they play... I can't seem to make the move. They play e6. Again, I'm dead in the water. I can't stop the pawn promoting. My best option would be to sack my rook with coming round to g8 and then giving it up, and I'm lost. So I have to trade pawns with f takes and pawn takes. And I think my best option is now things like rook d7. And I'm now losing my h-pawn, which I worked hard to get. And white can now leave their rook here on h5. The moment I take on e7, or from e7 to e5, white can then take h7. So no advantage for me, just 3 against 3 on the same side, draw. So that's if bishop takes e2. Similarly, if rook takes e2, I don't even stay a pawn up. Rook takes bishop, rook takes knight, pawn takes, I have to take back, rook takes, and we again have a drawn position, where if my king tries to run over, the white rook can end up taking pawns on the queen side. And also it's not easy to win that f4 pawn, it's deceptively difficult. So overall, my position is not so good. So that's why I played the very strange move after about 15 minutes of thinking. Pawn takes pawn, giving up my rook for knight, but trying to win enough pawns to get the game. And he pushed e5 to only lose one pawn instead of losing them both. So I won 2 pawns for 1. I'd already got pawn on h5, so I'm 2 pawns up with a bishop. And he now played a brilliant move. My plan is king f4 followed by just shoving my h-pawn. How does white stop me? They played the move rook f2, which I missed. Now my king is cut off, their king can come in, and I'm having to work hard not to lose. So h4. h3, I couldn't see anything better. And I was hoping for a trap. Rook f7 was what I hoped he would do. What do I play now to actually turn the game around and win? I can play the move which interferes with the path of the rook, bishop f5, defending the h7 square, also cutting his rook off from going to f1, so I'm very close to promoting. If rook to g1, it doesn't help, h2, and I'm still just in time. If rook check, I think yet again I can play bishop e6, and their rook has nowhere to go. Oh no, I can't do that, sorry. King f4. Oops. And I can't seem to, oh dear. And I can't seem to get this working. So where was it? Rook f2. Apologies for that. Yeah, king e3 was chosen in the game. But yeah, rook f7, bishop f5, rook e7 check. Yeah, I think king f4 might even be stronger, because if they come up with, say, rook e1, I can again do things like bishop e4, and I'm going to just push my pawn to h1, winning their rook. They'll have to sacrifice it for the newly promoted pawn. So white is losing if they do this. He didn't, he played king e3. I started pushing my pawns. If I can trade them all off, there's no way I'll lose. Rook d2. I push c5, trying to again push my pawns. It's also a little bit concerning for him. If he's not careful, I might get something here. King f2. So king g3 is the plan. I cut it out with king f4. And again, I was hoping for a trap. Rook d5. Can anyone see the winning plan for black in this position? Yet again, it's to push h2. Their rook can't stop me because the 2 squares needed to prevent the promotion are guarded by the bishop. So king g2 is forced. But then I can play bishop f3 with a fork on the king and rook. So I will win the game. King d8 was rook d8 was played. b4. Again, I want to trade pawns. So we did. Rook f8 check. I'm not sure if my move's correct. Maybe I should go king e4 or king e5, but I blocked with the bishop. Guard h7, guard h3, stop any more checks. King g1. I want to play king g3, but that would be very bad as I'd lose the bishop. So I play king e4, getting out the pin. Then bishop g6, making sure the bishop is happy. And one last time I was hoping for a trick with king takes pawn. What do you think I'm going to do now with my king? Well, I believe I can play king e3 with an attack on the c2 pawn. White can't defend the pawn with the rook. They also can't attack my c5 pawn in retaliation because f5 is clearly covered. But if rook c8, I go bishop f5 check, winning the rook. So white will have to play moves like c3, and I think yet again I can trade and then happen to capture the pawn. It's still a draw by like perfect play, but white's really struggling here. And if rook c8, I can play bishop f5 again. And I think if rook f3, which at first appears to save the pawn, I think king c4 is good enough. And then bishop d3, blocking the bishop, and just in time I take the pawn before their king comes over and makes things too difficult. And again, draw with perfect play, but I'd happily play this on trying to win. White did play rook c8 first though, didn't take the pawn, so king d4, and this is a really good move, c3. I think it's the only move that draws, or draws easily, because when I capture and they capture, if I take their pawn, they then take on c5. King c4. They didn't take the pawn because of bishop f5, and the rest of the moves are just us shuffling around where neither one of us can make any progress. So the game was agreed to draw. I did miss out on first place, but the player who had been on the same point as me won, so he came first. It's a very good performance. Performed at 2300 when he was only rated 2070, I think. And I was tied in second place along with about 3 other people, I want to say, on 4 out of 5 points. Overall, not a bad tournament. A little bit disappointed not to win this final game, but you can't have everything. And my rating did go up a little from the tournament overall. So I think I'll class it as a success on my road to 2400. Alright, hope you enjoyed the video despite the slight interruption at one stage. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.